There's a 2019 half-ton pickup sitting in a shop right now with 62,000 miles on the odometer and a $7,100 engine bill taped to the windshield. 62,000 miles. That's a truck that's barely broken in. The paint still looks good. The bed liner barely has scratches in it. And the engine is done because one little hydraulic lifter, a part about the size of your thumb, decided to collapse, bend a push rod, and chew up a camshaft. And here's the part that gets me. That lifter didn't fail because somebody skipped oil changes. It failed because of a feature that was printed right there on the window sticker as a selling point. Something the truck was designed to do on purpose. I've spent a lot of years around trucks, and I can tell you the old rule used to be simple. The more a truck did, the more that could break. But the stuff that broke used to be the extras. Power windows, a radio, maybe a cruise control module. Now the features are wired into the heart of the machine, into the valve train, into the fuel system, into the transmission itself. So when the feature fails, it doesn't leave you without a radio. It leaves you with a tow bill and a second mortgage. Today I'm going to walk you through 9 features on modern pickup trucks that were sold to you as progress and that quietly destroy long-term reliability. Real failure modes, real repair numbers, real recall campaigns, and stick around for number 9 because it's the one that's put more V8 engines in the scrapyard than Rust ever did, and the manufacturer knew about it for years. Let's get into it. Before the list, one thing you need to understand, because it explains all 9 of these. Almost none of these features exist because a truck owner asked for them. They exist because of a spreadsheet. Fuel economy regulations are calculated across a manufacturer's whole fleet, and every 1/10 of a mile per gallon is worth real money in credits and penalties. So engineers get handed a target and they bolt on whatever technology scrapes out that last half mile per gallon, and whether that technology survives 15 years and 200,000 miles is somebody else's problem, specifically yours. The old trucks weren't simple because engineers were dumber back then. They were simple because durability was the thing being sold. Now, the thing being sold is a number on a sticker. Keep that in mind as we count these off, because you're going to see the same pattern 9 times in a row. Feature number 1, automatic engine start-stop. This is the one where you roll up to a red light and the engine shuts off, then coughs back to life when you lift off the brake. On paper, it saves fuel while you're sitting still. In the real world, on a full-size pickup, the savings are tiny, and the cost shows up in parts that were never meant to work that hard. Think about what starting an engine actually is. It's the single most violent moment in that engine's day. For a fraction of a second, before oil pressure comes up, metal is riding on metal. The old mechanics used to say most engine wear happens at startup, and they were right. A truck without start-stop might fire up 3 or 4 times a day. With start-stop in city traffic, you can rack up 30 or 40 starts before lunch. Now, to be fair, and I'll always be fair with you, the engineers weren't stupid. They fitted beefed up starters and absorbent glass matte batteries designed for constant cycling. But those parts are consumables with a price tag to match. An AGM battery for one of these trucks runs $300 and up, roughly double a conventional battery, and when it weakens, the truck can start acting haunted. Warning lights, weird electrical gremlins, system shutting down, all traced back to a battery that got cycled to death, doing a job that saves you maybe a cup of coffee's worth of fuel a month. And the reinforced starter that makes all this survivable isn't a $50 part either. It's a few hundred in parts before labor. And it's now a wear item on a schedule instead of something you replaced once in a truck's life, if ever. Most trucks give you a button to turn it off, and most owners press that button every single time they start the truck, which tells you everything about how much the people who actually paid for the vehicle value this feature. Some even buy little plug-in memory modules whose entire purpose is to keep the system off permanently because the truck stubbornly re-enables it at every ignition cycle. Think about that arrangement for a second. The feature defaults to on because the fuel economy test requires it to be on. It exists for the fleet math, not for you. Feature number 2, direct injection without port injection. This one is sneaky because direct injection genuinely is clever engineering. Instead of spraying fuel into the intake port, it squirts it straight into the cylinder at enormous pressure, which gives you more power and better economy from the same displacement. The problem is what it quietly stopped doing. In an old port-injected engine, fuel constantly washed over the back of the intake valves, and gasoline is a solvent. So those valves stayed clean for hundreds of thousands of miles without anyone thinking about it. Go direct injection only, and the valves never see a drop of fuel again. Meanwhile, the crankcase ventilation system keeps pulling oily vapor through the intake, and that vapor bakes onto hot valves like grease on a stove burner, layer after layer, year after year. Around 80 to 100,000 miles, plenty of these engines start running rough, misfiring on cold mornings, losing power, and the fix is a job called walnut blasting, where a shop pulls the intake manifold and literally sandblasts your valves with crushed walnut shells. Figure $400 to $600, and it's maintenance now, not a repair, because the carbon comes right back. Here's the honest part. The manufacturers know. That's why Ford added port injection back alongside direct injection on the second generation EcoBoost truck engines, and why Toyota runs dual injection on a bunch of its stuff. When a company quietly reinstalls the old technology next to the new one, that's as close to an admission as you'll ever get. And I'll give you the honest caveat while we're here. People will sell you catch cans and fuel additives as the cure, and a catch can genuinely reduces how much oily vapor reaches the valves, but nothing poured in. The tank can clean valves the fuel never touches. That's just physics. The only real defenses are dual injection from the factory, regular oil changes with quality oil, and the occasional long, hard highway run to keep temperatures where deposits struggle to build. If you're shopping used, an engine with both injection systems is worth real money over one that only has direct. And a seller who can't explain a cold start stumble is telling you something without meaning to. Feature number 3, factory air suspension. Ram made this famous on the 1500 with its 4-corner air ride, and I'll admit it, the ride is beautiful. The truck kneels down to load, lifts up for off-road, hunkers down on the highway. When it works, it's the nicest riding pickup you'll ever sit in. Now here's what you're actually buying. Instead of 4 coil springs, which are basically bent pieces of steel that last more or less forever, you've got 4 rubber airbags, a compressor, a dryer, a valve block, height sensors at every corner, plastic air lines running the length of the frame, and a control module orchestrating all of it. Every one of those is a failure point, and the failures cascade. A tiny leak in one bag means the compressor runs constantly to keep up. The compressor overheats and burns out, and one cold morning, the whole truck is sitting on its bump stops in your driveway. Cold weather is the killer because moisture gets into the system and freezes. Owners in northern states report these systems giving up right around the hard freezes, truck slammed to the ground, service air suspension, message glowing on the dash. RepairPal puts the average compressor replacement around $1,500. Air springs run several hundred each. Get unlucky with springs, compressor, and lines together, and dealer quotes of $5,000 to $8,000 are documented. There were class action complaints on the 2013 to 2018 trucks over exactly this. And here's the punchline. There's a whole cottage industry selling kits to rip the air suspension out and convert these trucks back to ordinary coil springs, and owners line up to pay for the downgrade. When people pay money to remove a feature, the feature has failed. Feature number 4, small turbocharged engines doing a big engine's job. The pitch was seductive. Take a little V6, bolt on 2 turbos, and get V8 power with V6 fuel economy. And the power part is true. What the brochure skipped is that turbocharging doesn't eliminate the work, it concentrates it. A turbo engine towing a trailer is running higher cylinder pressures and brutal heat in a smaller, lighter package, with the turbochargers themselves glowing dull red on a long grade. Heat is the enemy of everything mechanical, and these engines live in it. And complexity piles on top. Take the most famous one, Ford's 3.5-liter EcoBoost. Great engine in many ways, I'll say that plainly, but the 2017 to 2020 trucks developed a cold start rattle from the cam phasers, the computer-controlled sprockets that adjust valve timing. It got so widespread that Ford ran a customer satisfaction program, 21NL3, replacing all 4 phasers on affected F-150s, Expeditions, and Navigators. That program has come and gone. Coverage ended at the start of 2023, and if your truck rattles now, the job runs $1,000 to $2,500 out of pocket, because it means opening up the front of a twin turbo engine. And some owners report the rattle coming back after replacement. Compare that to the philosophy it replaced. A big, lazy, naturally aspirated V8 loafing along at low stress, nothing bolted to the exhaust spinning at 150,000 RPM. Nobody ever walnut blasted or rephased their way through an old, small block's midlife. The little turbo engine passes the fuel economy test and makes a gorgeous spec sheet. The big, lazy engine just lasted. Feature number 5, hidden belts buried inside the engine. Here's one most people never find out about until the service writer breaks the news. Ford sold a 3.0-liter Power Stroke diesel in the F-150 from 2018 to 2021. A smooth, efficient little V6. And unlike the gear-driven and chain-driven diesels people picture, it runs a timing belt with a replacement interval of 150,000 miles. Fine, belts are a known thing, but this engine has a second belt driving the high-pressure fuel pump mounted at the back of the engine, jammed against the firewall in a space you can barely get a hand into, let alone see. Techs doing that rear belt describe working blind with an inspection camera, and depending on who you ask, the by-the-book approach on some jobs back there involves lifting the cab off the frame. Read that again. Removing the cab from the truck to change a belt. That's the kind of line item that turns a routine service into a $1,500 to several $1,000 event. And it's the moment a lot of these trucks stop making economic sense and get traded off. Now, this isn't only a Ford story. Across the industry, engineers have been tucking belts inside engines, sometimes even running them in engine oil, because a belt is quieter and cheaper at the factory than a chain or gears. Cheaper at the factory, not cheaper for you. The old rule from the guys who built industrial diesels was simple: anything that wears out must be reachable. That rule died in a packaging meeting because a tidy engine bay in the showroom sells better than a serviceable one in year 9. Feature number 6, the 10-speed automatic transmission. Ford and GM developed this gearbox together, the 10R80 on the Ford side, the 10L80 at GM, and on paper it's brilliant. 10 gears means the engine always sits at its most efficient RPM, shifts are lightning fast, and it helps both the fuel number and the towing number. In practice, the Ford version has been one of the sorest spots on the modern F-150. Owners of 2017 and newer trucks report clunking, harsh shifts, lunging, and in the ugly cases, the transmission dropping to neutral at speed. The famous culprit is a component called the CDF drum, where a bushing can walk out of position and block a hydraulic passage, so the transmission can't hold pressure in the upper gears. Repair bills documented by owners run from around $4,000 for a rebuild to over $10,000 for a replacement transmission when things go really wrong. Ford revised the drum with a lip design in late 2022 and handled the earlier trucks through service bulletins rather than a recall, which means plenty of owners just outside warranty ate the whole bill. There's consolidated class action litigation over it that's still grinding through the courts. And in early 2026 came a separate recall of roughly 1.3 million older F-150s over unexpected hard downshifts tied to a speed sensor signal. And here's a detail that tells you this isn't fate, it's execution. GM's version of the very same gearbox, near identical gear train, near identical clutch packs, has a noticeably better record in the field. And one big suspected reason is thermal. The GM unit runs its fluid cooler, and heat is exactly what encourages that aluminum drum to loosen its grip on the bushing in the first place. Same design, different cooling priorities, very different repair statistics. Now think about what all 10 of those gears bought you. Maybe 1 mile per gallon over a good modern 6-speed in exchange for hundreds of additional parts, tighter tolerances, and a valve body juggling 10 ratios hundreds of times per drive. The old 6 speeds, even the old 4 speeds, weren't exciting. They were just still working at 250,000 miles. Feature number 7. The modern diesel emissions package. If you bought a diesel pickup in the last 15 years, you didn't just buy an engine, you bought a chemistry plant bolted to the exhaust. Exhaust gas recirculation, a diesel particulate filter, selective catalytic reduction, and a tank of diesel exhaust fluid the truck injects downstream to neutralize emissions. Each piece does its job, and I'm not here to tell you clean air is a bad idea. I'm here to tell you what it does to reliability. The EGR system routes hot, sooty exhaust back through a cooler and into the intake, and those coolers clog and crack, leaking coolant into places coolant should never be. The particulate filter traps soot and burns it off in regeneration cycles that inject extra fuel. And if you use your diesel for short trips, the filter never fully cleans. The truck regens constantly, and raw diesel washes down the cylinder walls into the oil. That's why some diesel owners watch the oil level on the dipstick rise over time. Rising oil is fuel dilution, and it's quietly thinning the very stuff protecting your bearings. Then there's the DF system, where fluid crystallizes, injectors clog, sensors fail, and the truck responds by threatening a 5-mile-an-hour limp mode, sometimes with a countdown on the dash like a bomb in a bad movie. Any single fault in this chain can strand a mechanically perfect engine. That's the definition of engineered fragility, a healthy heart held hostage by its own plumbing. The engine underneath might genuinely be good for 500,000 miles. Whether the equipment wrapped around it allows that is a different question entirely. Feature number 8, the CP4 high-pressure fuel pump. If number 7 was death by 1,000 cuts, this one is a heart attack. Modern common rail diesels need a pump making tens of thousands of PSI of fuel pressure, and for years, the standard was the Bosch CP3, a 3-plunger unit so overbuilt that it routinely outlives the truck. Then came its replacement, the CP4, a 2-plunger design that's cheaper to make and slightly more efficient. One problem, the CP4's internals are lubricated by the diesel fuel itself. An American ultra-low sulfur diesel is drier with less natural lubricity than the European fuel the pump was really designed around. So, inside the pump, a roller starts skidding on its cam instead of rolling, metal grinds on metal, and the pump slowly mills itself into glitter. And because it sits at the head of the fuel system, that metal glitter gets pumped downstream through the rails, the lines, and all the injectors. The truck usually just shuts off, no warnings, sometimes on the highway, and the fix is not a pump. It's the entire fuel system. Owner bills run $8,000 to $14,000. This pump went into the 2011 to 2016 Duramax heavy-duty trucks, the 6.7 Power Stroke, the Eco Diesel, and briefly the 2019 and 2020 Cummins-powered Rams. And watch what the manufacturers did next, because actions talk. GM dumped it for a Denso pump in 2017. Ram went back to the old CP3 for 2021 and then recalled over 220,000 trucks to convert the 2019 and 2020 models back to CP3 at their own expense. When a company recalls its own product to reinstall the previous decade's part, the argument is over. If you own one of these trucks and it hasn't blown yet, you're not helpless. A full CP3 conversion runs a few $1,000s, which stings until you compare it to a $14,000 fuel system. And for around $400 in parts, there are bypass kits that reroute the pump's return fuel so that if it ever does start shedding metal, the debris hits a filter instead of your injectors. That doesn't save the pump, but it turns a catastrophe into a repair. And in this business, that trade is a bargain. And feature number 9, the big one, cylinder deactivation. This is the system that shuts down half your V8 at cruise so it sips fuel like a 4-cylinder. GM calls it active fuel management and later dynamic fuel management. Ram's Hemi had its own version called MDS. The idea is genuinely elegant. Special collapsible lifters unlock and stop opening the valves on selected cylinders, and the computer flips cylinders on and off seamlessly. The trouble is that the elegant idea lives or dies on that special lifter, a spring-loaded oil pressure-controlled mechanism doing millions of cycles in a part that used to be a solid chunk of steel with one job. When one sticks or collapses, and on these engines they do, it bends a push rod, misfires the cylinder, and starts machining the camshaft lobe into scrap. That's why the 5.3 and 6.2 liter GM V8s, engines whose ancestors were famous for going forever, generate ticking noises, check engine lights, and quotes that start around $3,000 or $4,000 for lifters and climb past $7,000 when the cam and metal debris drag the whole engine down. Owner data on the 2014 to 2018 trucks clusters the failures right around 120,000 miles, which is exactly when a truck like that should be hitting its stride. And GM doesn't own this problem alone. Ask any Ram owner about the famous Hemi tick, and you'll hear the same story with different part numbers, lifters, and cam lobes eating each other in an engine whose basic architecture is honest and strong. There's even a secondary problem nobody warns you about. Cylinders that spend their lives switched off don't get fuel washing through them. So they load up with carbon, and sometimes the misfires continue even after the mechanical repair. There are class action lawsuits over it. GM has extended coverage on some vehicles, and an entire aftermarket exists selling plug-in disabler modules whose only job is to stop the feature from activating. Sit with that. People spend their own money to switch off a factory selling point to protect the engine from itself. That is the whole story of this video in one part number. Now, here's the part that actually matters, because you might be asking how 9 different features from 4 different manufacturers all rot the same way. It's not a conspiracy, and I want to be straight about that. It's just arithmetic. 3 columns of it. Column 1 is the regulation. Fleet fuel economy targets put a dollar value on every fraction of a mile per gallon. So a feature that saves half an mpg is worth millions in credits across 1 million trucks. And it gets approved even if it adds a fragile mechanism to a durable engine. Nobody at that meeting is scored on what the truck costs to own in year 9. Column 2 is the showroom. 10 speeds beats 6 speeds on a brochure. 400 horsepower from a V6. Sounds like the future. Air suspension demos beautifully on a 5-minute test drive. Every one of these features is at its absolute best in the first 30 minutes of ownership, which is exactly when the buying decision happens. Column 3 is the service department, and this is the quiet one. There is no money in a truck that needs nothing. There is a great deal of money in a truck that needs a $1,500 compressor, a $2,000 phaser job, a $4,000 lifter repair, all conveniently landing just past the warranty. I'm not saying anyone designs parts to fail. I'm saying that when durability stopped being the thing that sells the truck, nobody with power over the design was left holding the incentive to protect it. The engineers who overbuilt the old stuff weren't better people. They just worked for companies that got paid for longevity. Change what gets rewarded, and you change what gets built every time. And that's really the thing we're sitting with for a minute. A pickup truck used to be the one honest machine an ordinary person owned. It was the appliance that outlived the marriage, the dog, and sometimes the house. Its whole identity was that it did not quit. What we've traded for a smoother ride and a rounder number on a window sticker is that certainty and the ability to understand our own machine. Because you can't fix a collapsed AFM lifter in your driveway, and you can't reason with a DF countdown timer. Somewhere along the line, the truck stopped being yours in the way that matters, the way where you know its sounds, trust its habits, and can keep it alive with your own 2 hands. Good engineering is honest. It tells you what it costs up front. A lot of what's bolted to a modern truck tells you the cost later in the service lane when your options have narrowed to 1. So here's what I want you to take away from all this. If you're shopping used, treat the window sticker as a list of suspects. Check whether that V8 has cylinder deactivation and whether it's had lifter work documented. Ask if a diesel from the CP 4 years has had the pump converted or a disaster kit fitted, because that paperwork is worth thousands. On a 2017 to 2022 F-150, ask for proof the transmission got the updated drum, and cold start the engine yourself and listen for the phaser rattle in the first 2 seconds. On an air suspension truck, look up the service history and factor a coil conversion into your offer. If you're keeping the truck you have, be kind to its weak points. Turn off start-stop. Let a turbo engine idle a minute after a hard pull. Give a direct injection engine a highway run and good oil. Give a diesel the long hot drives its filter needs. And if you're choosing between 2 trucks, remember that the boring one, the naturally aspirated engine, the simpler gearbox, the steel springs, is usually the one still working when the clever one is a listing on a salvage auction. Add up the worst cases we covered today, and it's sobering. $4,000 for lifters, $4 to $10 for a transmission, up to $14 for a fuel system, $5 to $8 for air suspension. Any one of those bills is more than the fuel these features will ever save you over the entire life of the truck. And that's the ledger nobody shows you at the dealership. 6 months from now, when a buddy shows you a great deal on a truck and you cold start it, hear that half-second rattle, and quietly save yourself an $8,000 mistake. This video will have paid for its runtime a few hundred times over. Tell me in the comments below which of these 9 features has bitten you personally, what it costs, and what truck it was in. Because the repair bills you all post are honestly a better database than anything the manufacturers publish. And I read every single one of them. That's not a throwaway line. Those comments are half the reason I keep making these. If this saved you from a bad buy or explained a noise you've been ignoring, subscribe, because next time we're pulling apart one of the biggest quiet lies in modern maintenance, the so-called lifetime transmission fluid. The fluid they tell you never needs changing in a transmission with no dipstick to check it, and the detail that'll get you is who actually recommends changing that lifetime fluid anyway, because the name on that recommendation is the last one you'd expect, and it changes the whole argument. Until then, keep the simple stuff serviced, stay suspicious of anything the brochure is too proud of, and I'll see you in the next one.